Start Memches Amud Beis, and it's let's see, 11 lines from the bottom, right? Tana, the second word on the line is Tana. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. It's chus of our learning. We should have the basic English immediately. Okay, it starts like this. Tana, it was taught in a brisa. Masar av l'shluchei abal v'zinsa hareza bechenek. You see, there's a shift in the punishment of a woman that there's mizana, that commits adultery. If she's a nara hamarasa, if she's a 12, in between 12 and 12 and a half, and she's only betrothed. Good morning. What's going on? Oh, yeah. Take a Gemara from over there. Where I'm impressed. You see, you want in English? So there's an English in here. If I'm not mistaken, it's a volume 16. Go down 4 shelves. Go up 1 shelf. No, and to the right. You see the ones with the paper covers? Yeah. Does it say kesubos? Let's see. Yeah. Now, let's find the page. Daniel, you know what page we're on here? In the Quran?
272, I think.
272. Yeah. There you go. On the 272 on the top. So there's a shift. If she's married, not just betrothed, then her punishment is chenek. If she's betrothed, then her punishment is skila. It's between strangulation or stoning if she commits adultery. Here, what we're saying is that even if she's not really married, but the father has given his daughter over to the messengers of the husband, that's already enough. And it's already chenek. It's already in that new category of the married woman that has that other punishment or chenek, as opposed to skila for the nara maras. Skila is the exception. It's only in that specific case. Okay, well, Minani Mili, where do we know this from? Amar Abami Bar Chama. I'm not so familiar with him. Maybe Abami Bar Chama. Maybe it's the Eretz Yisrael, like Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama. Rabbi Chama Bar Rabbi Chanina. I'm not sure. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Okay. Amar Kra, quotes a pasuk. Says Liznei Spesavia. Who acts promiscuously in her father's house. And what does that mean? That's the one that gets skila. This is the nara marasa that gets skila. That's prat l'shemasar ha'av l'shluchi abal. She's not anymore in the father's house. She's already been handed over to the messengers of the husband. So then she gets the new punishment, which is chenek. Liznei space of if she's in her father's house, then she gets skila. But here she's not in her father's house anymore. Okay. Is it? No, for the Nasuin. The messengers that are going to take her to the chuppah. Oh. Amar Rava. Did I just skip? Yeah. The Ema, the Gemara asks a question. I skipped. The Ema, the Gemara asks, maybe it's prat l'shnechnasa l'chuppah v'lei nivala. How do you know that it means a prior stage? She already gets chenek. When she's just handed over to the messengers of the husband, maybe it means when she enters into the chuppah, that means the husband's house. But she didn't have relations with the husband yet. The marriage wasn't consummated. But nevertheless, she went into the husband. In other words, maybe it's a later stage that the status would change from skila to chenek. How do you know it's the earlier stage? Just when she leaves the father's hands and goes into the messenger's hands. Maybe it's a later stage. Maybe when she enters into the husband's house, the chuppah. That's when her status changes. Well, Amarava, Amali Ami. Rav had this before yesterday. Amali Ami. Chuppah behed yiksiva. For that, I don't need the pasuk of Liznei Space Avia. For that, I have another source. What's the other source? It says, Kiyen Nara Besula Mayrasalish. The same section. It says if there would be a girl that's a virgin that is betrothed to a man. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at each one of these words. Nara means a girl. Volay Begeris, and she's not mature. She's not 12 and a half. She's only 12. It says Nara. And that's when she's going to get skila. Besula means that she was a virgin. What does it mean? Volay Be'ula, that she never had relations before. Marasa, she's betrothed. Volay Nesua, and she's not married. And now, 1 second. You just told me before that she's a virgin. Now you tell me that she's not married. My Nesua, what do you mean that she's not married? Ilay Nesua Mamish, if you mean literally married. I know Besula Volay Be'ula. When you told me that she's a virgin and she never had relations, then that would already include someone that's married. Or preclude. It would already preclude someone that's married because it said she had to be a virgin. It must be talking about where she's married because she entered into the husband's house, but she never consummated the marriage. You see, that case already tells me that this pasuk already tells me that over there her halacha would be chenek. So what is the pasuk of Liznei Space Avia adding to that? Even when she's handed over to the messengers of the husband. Already chenek at an earlier stage. Okay. The Gemara has an interesting question here. This is like students in yeshiva ask, what if this happens? And there's no way of answering every what if question. But the Gemara here asks, what if she's handed over to the husband's messengers, and say the husband dies? Is she considered that she goes back, Hajjal and Elsa Kamaisa? Does she go back to her father's house? And she goes back to the father's house, and she would then get skila if she commits adultery. No, the husband died. She's not married to anyone. So let's not say the husband died. Let's just say that she gets returned to the messengers, whatever, take her back, for whatever reason. The husband's still alive, or else it's not considered adultery. So she goes back to the father's house. Let's say that this whole halacha just switched, just like that. It goes back from chenek, would go back to skila, and that's a category of what punishment she would get if she commits adultery. Well, the answer to that is maybe, so what? Maybe yes. But the Mishnah doesn't seem to be saying that. The Mishnah said that once she's handed over to the messengers of the husband, her status changes. And it doesn't go back. It sounds like it doesn't go back. And here we're saying, but maybe it does go back. I have an answer to that already from the statement, the psak of what came out of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana de Rabbi Yishmael was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, v'neder almana grusha, the vow of a widow or a divorcee. Usually, a father can annul his daughter's vows when she's young. Then when she gets married, the husband can annul his wife's vows. What if she's betrothed? So then you need the father and the husband. He's not really married yet. What if she's widowed? So if she's widowed, v'neder almana grusha, kol asher asher al nafshi yakam alav. Then she has to keep her vows. There's no one there to annul it, unless she gets the rabbi to annul it. But not the father and not the husband or divorced. So matal madlaimar, what are you telling me with this pasuk? Halay moitzes b'chlal av, moitzes b'chlal baal. 1 second. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. She wasn't in the father's jurisdiction and she's not in the husband's jurisdiction. So I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. There is, the father is like, she's out of the house. That's obvious. And the husband doesn't exist. So he's out of his, so the whole pasuk is obvious. Ella, rather, it's coming to tell me, we're looking for where this case should be in halacha that needs to be taught to me. If, let's say, the father gave her over to the messengers of the husband, or the messengers of the father gave over to the messengers of the husband. In other words, she's on the way to the wedding, but she's already been handed over to the messengers. And she became widowed or divorced along the way. That's what I thought before I was talking about widowed as well. How can I say that she's in the father's house or she's in the husband's house? It's coming to tell me, it's coming to tell me that there's no return. She doesn't go back to the father's house once she's handed over to the messengers of the husband. So that would go back to what we said before, that if she's handed over to the messengers of the husband and then gets returned to the father, her status doesn't go back to being under the category of skila. It's already switched over to chena. Okay. We learn this from the vows. And how do we learn this from the vows? Because Neder Almano Grusha is coming to tell me the halacha that when she's handed over to the husband's messengers, that she doesn't go back to that her father should be able to annul her vows. Amar Rav Papa Afananami Tanina. Rav Papa says we actually learned this in a Mishnah. Not mamash mefurish in a Mishnah, but it's going to be very clear that this is what the Mishnah would imply. Habal naram rasa v'einachai v'adshitei nara besulam rasa v'hiba. Okay, Mishnah says that if someone commits adultery with a girl that's 12 years old and she's betrothed to a man, so she's basically married but not fully married, so he's only going to be chayiv skila, right? Unless that special halacha of skila, because she's in that category, stoning. Unless she's a nara, I mean, in between 12 and 12 and a half, she needs to be a virgin. I mean, never had relations. Morasa, she has to be betrothed, and she has to be still in the father's house. Now, Fishleim and nara, where do we get that there needs to be a nara of lay begeres? What nara is telling me is that she's not a begeres. She's not 12 and a half. Basula, what's Basula telling me? V'lay ba'ula, that she didn't have relations yet. Morasa, what is Morasa telling me? V'lay nesua, that she's not fully married, she's only betrothed. What is in the father's house telling me? It must be telling me that once she's not in the father's house, then this whole halacha is over. Well, what would it mean that she's not in the father's house? It means that she's handed over to the messengers of the husband. If it was that she's married already, you already told me she's married. Murasa v'lei nesua, betrothed and not married. So what does it mean that she's in the father's house? And she's not in middle either. Hasn't been handed over to the messengers of the husband. So that's Rav Papa telling us that exactly what you told us is already in a Mishnah. Okay. Exactly what the Brisa said. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Kapanan Nami Tanina. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says we also have it in a Mishnah, and I think the same generation of Papa and Nachman is. Haba al ish, someone that lives with a married woman. Kivin shenichnas al rishus habal in a suin. Once she enters in to the husband's domain for marriage, even if she didn't have relations yet, if marriage wasn't consummated, then she's in the status of chenek. Even though the marriage wasn't consummated with her husband, but nevertheless, this adultery would cause the punishment of chenek. You mentioned over here that she enters into the domain of the husband. Ba'alma, that means any sort of domain of the husband, which means even if she was handed over to the messengers. Shema mina. We see that already changes the status, like we taught in the Brisa at the beginning. Okay, starting the Mishnah now. It's a very interesting Mishnah, very extremely unique. This one of a kind. Goes like this: a father is not obligated to support his daughter. I think it means once she reaches the age of 6 or something. There's going to be later. The Gemara is going to tell us to what age. But even as a young girl, once she's able to probably do her own work or something, that's it. She doesn't have to support. Now, here's the interesting part. You remember that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah took over the yeshiva when there was a conflict between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel had embarrassed Rabbi Yeshua about different things, and he was arguing with him. And the student said, "This is enough. You can't let Rabbi Gamliel do this." So they took down Rabbi Gamliel from his post, and they put in Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, "Behold, I'm like 70 years old." Okay, so Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is teaching now in front of the sages the Kerem b'Yavne. Kerem b'Yavne is the vineyard in Yavne. Yavne is where the Sanhedrin was. It's called the vineyard because the students sat in rows, like a vineyard is planted in rows. It's one of the commentaries. Well, what does he teach? What he's going to do is, usually when I have psukim that I have one next to another, I can say, well, the halacha of this one is going to be similar to that one because of that juxtaposition. I'm going to learn one from the other. What Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is going to do is he's going to tell us that two statements that are in the ksuba, I'm going to learn one from the other. It's not a pasuk. It's just a document. He's going to tell us that we're going to darshan one, that the halacha of this is going to apply to that. Let's take a look. It says, Yershu, Habanim Yershu, sons inherit the mother's ksuba. Now, this is relevant because a man is would be allowed to marry more than one wife. Now, a father's going to want to give his daughter a dowry to bring into the marriage. Only problem is that he doesn't want that being split with when the daughter passes away and the husband passes away. Going to be split with these foreigners from other wives. Those children are going to end up taking his possessions. He's going to be leaving his family because of that split. So what he would write in the ksuba is that the dowry is going to go after the death of the couple, is going to go just to her sons, not to the other sons. And as the father's property gets divided equally. But this dowry that's being brought in, these items, maybe family items, I don't know, but he wants it to he wants it to stay with his sons, not split with the other children. Okay. Not split with his daughter's co-wife's children, rival wife's children. Okay. So Abanim Yershu, the sons are going to inherit that part of the ksuba, that dowry. And Rabbanis Yizuna. And the daughters will be sustained. Is that the vowels over there? How do you pronounce it? Yeah, Yizainu will be sustained from the estate. Okay, that's what it says in the ksuba. What does it mean the daughters will be sustained by the estate? That means when the sons are going to inherit, the daughters don't inherit. But nevertheless, they don't take chunks out of the inheritance, as you know, to divide it equally amongst the daughters, but nevertheless they still get the stipend for food that they should be able to live off that as long as until they get married, actually. Until they get married. Right? Ma habanim, and okay, now here comes Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's drasha. Ma habanim in yarshim malachim misasaav. Just like when do the sons get their inheritance of the mother's dowry? That's after the father passes away. They don't take it right when the mother passes away. The wife brought it into the marriage. The father can still use it. The husband can still use it. The wife brought it into the marriage. It still belongs to the wife. When does it get passed on to the sons? That's when the husband passes away, right? It was the wife's. The wife passed away. Let's say the husband still used it. When the husband passed away, then the sons inherited. So most of the daughters only need to be sustained from the estate after the father passes away. While the father's alive, he doesn't have to support it. He support the girls. It's odd. Yeah. After the father dies, she's in a better situation. Okay. No, we only things we have to do in the best and where mechila things where someone would allow that we would have their sign document saying that they're Michael the inheritance that was coming to them because they weren't living there and they just didn't mind if their sister took it or whatever. And because of the Israeli laws, maybe rabbinic laws, of the way inheritance works in Israel, they would have to show up in the best and be Michael, in front of us, whatever, and then we would sign it and certify it and send it back. They were just certifying the document that she was Michael.
I would think the exact opposite, right? That the reading would be just like because in the ketubah the daughters are receive sustenance. So in the lifetime, they should receive sustenance also.
So you wanted to say that the sons should inherit in the lifetime? No, not the two, not Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah's version.
Yeah, the part about the son, like I guess just like the sons are, responsible. The father is responsible for the son's actions during the lifetime. I don't know. That's a harder one, but I'm focusing more on the second part.
Now, there's one detail here that the Gemara is going to discuss, which makes it more palatable. We'll see in a minute. Right now, it looks like very harsh. The father doesn't support his daughters, but when he passes away, they get sustained by the estate. But let's see in the Gemara. There's some details here. The Gemara now says, "The mezainas bita Yehuda ein chayev." He doesn't have to support the daughters. But he's obligated to support his sons. Isn't that interesting? Gemara says another point. That's an important point. He doesn't have the obligation to support his daughters, but he has a mitzvah to support his daughters. What's the difference, obligation and the mitzvah? Obligation means that the Bezdin would go into the property and evaluate what it's worth and start selling it off. If there's an obligation there, just like he has a debt, right? They would confiscate. But
how did the Moshe convince the Jew to pay it if there was no obligation?
No, over there, it was an inheritance of the land, and there were no sons, and the father had an inheritance, and who was going to get that? You're just going to disappear?
So you can't say it was an obligation.
No, so here, that's referring to an inheritance. Here we're talking about while the father's alive, does he have to support how long is he supposed to support his children? At what point does he kick them out of the house and say, go get a job? So from the Gemara, it's I guess age 6 or something like that. Okay, time's up. Yeah. So the mitzvah means that it's strongly encouraged, and but the Bezdin isn't gonna confiscate his property in order for that to be sustained. Right. Something that you're supposed to do.
I was judging them for that. As long as they were.
The Gemara asks, Mani Mas Nisin, who is the author of our Mishnah? The Gemara does this when we have a brisa that knows other opinions. And our Mishnah does not fit with any of those opinions. So that becomes problematic. It says, Mani Mas Nisin, who's the author of our Mishnah? Lei Rab Meir, Lei Rab Yudav, Lei Rab Yechim ben Breka. Oh, wow.
It's about time. Well, I have a question. You in New York, not New Jersey, right? I need to know this answer. Was he in New York or New Jersey? You know why I asked?
Because he said that he's with the
With
Giants.
And then you said it's some Spring John must be New Jersey, but I don't think that's what he meant. That's what I'm wondering.
Yitzi Wachman. So
Yitzi,
big
just
commotion.
tell us, where were you? New York. See, I knew it was New York. No, you assumed that.
you know what happened with this Mr. Shliach was there in Kippur, you know the story. He's driving very fast. It's it's late, so he gets pulled over by the police. Police tells him he's speeding. So he says, "Oh, it's in Kippur." He said, "Is that the day that Sandy Koufax didn't want to pitch?" So he says, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, I'm going to let you go." So anyway, he's driving. Anyway, he sees the lights behind him again. He pulls over. The police gets out. He says, "I just want to warn you that you're about to leave my jurisdiction and you're going to go into the next area." And the police over there doesn't know anything about baseball. Okay. So, who's the author of our Mishnah? It's not Reb Meir, it's not Reb Yehuda, and it's not Reb Yechim ben Breka. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. We have to go through these opinions to see how our Mishnah doesn't fit, and then what the Gemara is going to do is going to say, actually, you know what? It can fit with any of these opinions if you reread the Mishnah. Okay, we had an implication from the Mishnah that 2 points. One is that the father has an obligation to support the son, but not the daughter. And another point is that he doesn't have an obligation to support the daughter, but he has a mitzvah to support the daughter. Those are 2 points that are messing up the fitting with the brisa, with any of the opinions of the brisa. And all of that is the implication. It doesn't say that clearly in the Mishnah. Well, it starts like this. The Tanya, the brisa says, mitzvah lazin asabanis kal v'chaim alabanim. You see already that there's a problem. It's putting the sons in the same category as the daughters. It says it's a mitzvah to support the daughters. Okay, that can fit with the Mishnah. However, kal v'chaim alabanim. But for sure, there's a mitzvah to support the sons, to ask about Torah because they're busy studying Torah. Divrei Reb Meir, that's the words of Reb Meir. Now, from Reb Meir, we don't see that there's an obligation to support the sons. It's just another mitzvah. It's a problem because our Mishnah seemed to say that there was an obligation to support the son, but possibly not. One of the things you see from Reb Meir is that the mitzvah to support the sons is if they're in yeshiva. This would fall off if they're not in yeshiva. Rabbi Yehuda Imer mitzvah lasan asabanim. It's a mitzvah to support the sons. The kal v'chaim alabanis mishum zilusa, and for sure he has to support the daughters, because if he doesn't support the daughters, you see the sons, it's easier for them to go work or beg or whatever, but the daughters, it's embarrassing. It's shameful for them to have to go beg. So for sure there's a mitzvah for him to support the daughters. From Rabbi Yehuda, you don't see that the sons need to be in yeshiva. He's supposed to be supporting his sons. Till when? It doesn't say. But whatever the case is, the same thing should apply to the daughters. Now, how does that not fit with the Mishnah? Because he also says that there's no obligation to support the sons. Our Mishnah made it look like there's an obligation to support the sons. Didn't say it, but that was implied. This is going to be very difficult. It's an obligation to support the daughters after the father dies. I guess it means from the state. But while the father's alive, no one gets support. This clearly is problematic. What does it mean? No one gets support even for a mitzvah? Or whatever the case is, it's a problematic because we have a distinction between sons and daughters regarding obligation. According to Rabbi Yechon ben Breka, it seems that it's the same status. Kemani Masnisen, which one would fit best with our Mishnah? Reb Meir Hamar Banim Mitzvah. If it's Reb Meir, problem is our Mishnah says that sons, he says, Reb Meir says that the supporting of the sons is just a mitzvah, it's not an obligation. Our Mishnah seems to say it's an obligation. Reb Yehuda Hamar Banim Nami Mitzvah. If it's Reb Yehuda, it should be probably Nami, Amar Nami Banim Mitzvah, but it says that. Amar Banim Nami Mitzvah. It's the same point. But basically, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda say the same point, that there's a mitzvah on both of them. But he also says the same thing like Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda says. Reb Yechon ben Breka, feel a mitzvah namilach, and if it's Reb Yechon ben Breka, you don't even have a mitzvah to support the sons or the daughter, right? While he's alive. The Gemara goes and says, Iba Yasema, if you want, you could say it's Reb Meir. Iba Yasema Reb Yehuda. If you want, you could say it's Reb Yehuda. Iba Yasema Reb Yechon ben Breka. If you want, say it's Reb Yechon ben Breka. So we're going from extreme to extreme. First, we have no one that could be the author of our Mishnah. And now we're going to say that it could be everyone. It depends how you want to read the Mishnah. The problem was because it was all based on the implication of what the Mishnah says. And it wasn't, none of this problem is actually stated in the Mishnah. It's just what we want the Mishnah to imply. Iba Yasema Reb Meir, if you want, you could say it's Reb Meir Vachikam. And this is, we'll go back to the Mishnah, we'll read the Mishnah. This is what it's going to say. Vachikam. Ha'av ina chayav b'mezeinas pita. A father is not obligated to support his daughter for the food of his daughter. Look at this. And the same thing for his son. We didn't say that before. But so why do you say the daughter? But there's to support his daughter, it's a mitzvah. And for sure, he has to support the son. So why do you only tell me the daughter? It says, Hakamash Malan, well, the daughter had a chiddush. The afilu bitay chayvahu deleka hamitzvah ikka. Even though the daughter doesn't, there's no obligation to support the daughter. The daughters don't study Torah. But so let them go get a job. But nevertheless, there still is a mitzvah to support the daughter. That's the chiddush of Reb Meir. And as Reb Meir, his logic was, why is there an obligation to support the sons? Because they study Torah. Not an obligation. Reb Meir said there's a mitzvah to support the sons, not an obligation. In other words, what our Mishnah is telling me is that there's, according to Reb Meir, there's no obligation to support the sons or the daughters, but there is a mitzvah to support the sons and the daughters. So why do you only tell me that there's no obligation to support the daughter? It sounds like there's a mitzvah to support the daughter. What happened to the sons? It says, well, I would have thought that there's not even a mitzvah to support the daughter. I would understand that there's a mitzvah to support the sons because they study Torah. Maybe there's no mitzvah to support the daughter. The chiddush of our Mishnah is that there's no obligation to support the daughter, but there's a mitzvah to support the daughter, even though she doesn't study Torah. There still is that mitzvah. If you want, you could say that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. And now we'll go back and read the Mishnah as well, one more time. The father doesn't have to support his daughter. That doesn't have the obligation. For sure, he doesn't have to support the son. But there is a mitzvah to support the sons, and there's also a mitzvah to support. For sure, there's a mitzvah to support the daughters because it's more shameful for the daughters to have to go beg. So if there's a mitzvah on both, so why do you only say the daughters? The mitzvah to support the daughters. It says, someone to tell me the chiddush that the daughters, it's only a mitzvah to support them, it's not an obligation. Could have thought that the daughters it would be an obligation on the father to support. It's coming to tell me that there's no obligation on the father. Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, Rabbi Yehuda's reading is a little bit easier because the Mishnah doesn't tell me ha'av mitzvah al ha'av lazan espita. The Mishnah doesn't say. The Mishnah just says ha'av ein achayav b'mezeinas espita. That's chiddush. Even though it's embarrassing for them to have to go beg or to go work at such a young age. Okay. and dishonor. Very good. That's the zilusa. Okay. Iba Yisem Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika. We can also say the Mishnah is Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika. Did I skip something? No. No, this is good. If you want, we could say it's the third opinion. He's not obligated to support his daughter. He's not obligated to support his son. He's not, doesn't even have a mitzvah. Why did the banis lachem chayva? So why did you think that there was a mitzvah to support the daughter? Because it says Eina Chayev, he's not obligated. But he's not obligated. It sounds like maybe there is a mitzvah. No. What happens is that after the father's death, there is an obligation. So it's coming to tell me that while the father's alive, there's no obligation. It's not coming to imply that there's a mitzvah. The no obligation doesn't tell me no obligation, but there is a mitzvah. No, the no obligation tells me the time of the no obligation. That it's while he's alive, there's no obligation. After the death, there's obligation. But it uses the term no obligation because that term is used after the death.
Is the idea here that you don't need an obligation because obviously the father is going to support his children?
I'm not sure.
No.
I'm not sure. All of this is, it seems quite obvious when the family is intact. But in divorce cases, these halachas become very significant. 1 second, you have a obligation. Where's the money for the daughter, for the son, for the thing? You know, they argue about these things. It's no, it's your obligation. Living with you, it's your obligation. The Mishnah says, no, it becomes complicated. So, yeah. Okay. Amar Rabbi La, Amar Reish Lakish, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina. Maybe Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Reish bar Chanina is more common. Be'usha Eskino, Shehei Adam Zanes Banaves B'nai Kshem Ketanim. There was an institution that the Sanhedrin made when the Sanhedrin was in Usha. That was one of the places where they were. Went from Yavna to Usha, back to Yavna. I think Usha they were in twice also. So in Usha, there was an institution that a man is obligated to support his sons and daughters while they're before bar mitzvah. Ibailo. Well, there's a question. This was taught to us by Rabbi La. Is the halacha like Rabbi La or not? Is there actually this obligation? It sounds like they made this institution that now that became the halacha. The modern halacha is, since Usha, that there is an obligation to support them until bar and bas mitzvah, if the halacha is like this. Well, Tashima. When a case like this would come in front of Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Lahu, he said to them, Yared Yalda, B'nei Masya Shadya. Yeah. I guess in Yirmiyahu, it uses this word Yared in the Targum. I'm not sure what a yared is. Is it a bird? Type of bird? Is it a type of fish? I always thought tanin was a type of fish.
Jackal.
What is it? What is a jackal? A jackal is a bird?
Like a leopard, no?
Oh, it's a leopard? It's an animal? Oh, so it's an animal. Okay. It says the jackal gives birth, but he imposes he imposes the support of his children on the community, on the city, as he doesn't feed them. Oh, it's a bird. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, so there's another translation of Yared. Okay, so what we see from this is that Rabbi Yehuda did not go down to the property and take possessions and start to sell it off to be able to feed the children. He just made a derogatory comment. So what, do you have children and you don't and you just impose on the community? Okay. When it came in front of Rav Chisda, Amlu Kapule Asita Bitzibura. He said, turn over a millstone in public, Valekum, and stand up, Valema, and say, Urva boy bana, Vahai Gavrale boy bana. A raven feeds its children. Boy, what does boy mean? Boy means wants. Or wants to feed his children, and this man doesn't want to feed his children. The Gemara asks, Urva boy bana. The raven wants to feed his children, but says that God gives the food to the children of the raven that call out because the raven is considered a cruel father. He just ignores the family. The raven. Oh, really? Oh. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Well, here this is not the jackal. This is the raven. And now this is the next step. And we have a pasuk that seems to imply that it doesn't. Who was it? Rav Chisda's comment was that even a raven feeds the children, and this guy doesn't. But the Gemara says, 1 second, a raven doesn't feed the children. So it says. Yeah, the Gemara says that Talmidei Chachamim are called. That's something else. The Gemara says Talmidei Chachamim are cruel to their families like a raven, because they leave to the yeshiva and they leave the wives and the children to fend for themselves. Yeah, this is not a Hira l'Rabbi. It's not. Daf Yomi is not a halacha sheh. I remember someone went to learn. His wife says, "What in the Gemara?" Says, "What about me?" He says, "Oh, there's cucumbers in the garden or something. You'll find something over there." So, okay, what was that? Oh yeah, you go to YU. That's the different story. Yeah. The point of this is that he doesn't have the authority to go and start taking property to feed the children. He's just making the sages are just making these comments that you really should, but it doesn't mean that they can take the possessions and start to sell them off for food. Yeah, to embarrass him, to encourage it, but it doesn't mean that it's a chiyuv. Well, like the Gemara says, what do you tell it talking about the ravens? They do, they don't. It says like kasha b'chivri abachmi. Depends, the white ravens, the black ravens. There's a difference between them. You see the dark ravens. When it gets older, the ravens turn dark, and that's when the father and the mother recognize. When it's white, the father raven and the mother raven don't recognize the bird as their offspring, and so that's why they're cruel to it. Interesting. Rava would say, it's good. You're happy about your sons eating from the charity box. That's that's like a shteh, right? So however, all of this is only if the father was not evaluated to be a wealthy man. But if he was evaluated to be a wealthy man, then they force him. Why? Look at this. Rava forced Reb Nosson Barami to give tzedakah. So if you can force him to give tzedakah, which that's clearly not an obligation, that's just a mitzvah. So you can also force him to feed the children. Amar Rabbi La Amar Reish Lakish. Rabbi La says in the name of Reish Lakish, Busha Hiskino, the instituted Nusha, Hakaisu Kol Nechasel Levanav, let's say someone writes over all his property. It sounds like he's doing something for tax, avoid taxes. He writes over all his property to his sons. Okay, now what does he do? How does he support himself? Well, him and his wife can live off of the son's property. Even though he's already given it, he still lives off that. What do you mean? We have an even greater statement than that. What do you need to tell me this? What does Rabbi La need to tell me this? I have something even greater. It says, the widow lives off his property. So for sure he's going to live off. The widow lives off the estate. For sure he can live off the estate, which is his son's now. The sons got their inheritance early. For sure him and his wife can live off the estate. The Shalach Ravin Bigarte. Ravin sent in a letter, Misha Mace, the one that passed away, Vinyach Almano, Basal Manusai. He left the widow and a daughter. Well, what happens is the daughter ends up taking the property together with her husband. And so how does the widow support herself? Well, Nizenis Minachasav. They live off the husband, the son-in-law's property. I'm sorry. They live off the estate. Nisis Abbas. If the daughter gets married, that's the case. But the widow can live off that husband's estate, the son-in-law's estate as well. Mesa Abbas, let's say the daughter passed away. Rav Yehuda ben Achaisis or Rabbi Bechnina al Yadi Hayamaisa. Rabbi Yehuda the nephew of Rabbi Bechnina says that I had the story like this. If the widow lives off the estate, then for sure him and his wife will live off the estate. Now, if that's the case, so why do I need Rab Eloi to tell me that him and his wife can live off the estate? We have that already from an earlier source. The Gemara says, comes to tell me over there, the widow lives off the estate because the widow's not going to go to work. But over here, it's him and his wife. Maybe once he gives all his possessions to his son, maybe he should now get a new job and support him and his wife. This comes to tell me that he doesn't have to. That's a chiddush that Rabbi Loeb is bringing out. Gemara says, is the halacha like Rabbi Loeb or not? Tashemad, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yechna, Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan, I'm sorry. We're standing Asu Gavra, Gachan Menaskil, Rabbi Yonasan Akari. He bows down and he kisses Rabbi Yonasan on his feet. Amalei Rabbi Chanina, my hi. Rabbi Chanina said, what's going on? Why is he kissing you on your feet? Amalei, so he said, Rabbi Yonasan said, Kaisim Nechasel Levanavu. He had written all his possessions to his son, Basatino Lizane, and I forced him to support the father. So the father's coming to tell me, thank you so much. Okay. If we say that wasn't the halacha, so that's what it means that he forced him. But if we say that's the halacha that he's supposed to eat off the son's estate anyway, so asinu boy, he needed to force him. But there was no big chiddush what he did. That was the halacha. It was the dry halacha. It must be that the halacha is not like Rabbi Loi, and what Rabbi Yonasan did was something that was like a kindness to the father. Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Shakaya.
Have a good day.
Thank you. All right.